Chapter the 13th. Nicholas Flameball Flamel. Dumbledore had successfully persuaded Harry not to go looking for the Dumbledore again, and for the rest of the Christmas holidays the invisibility ring was taken out only when he wanted to steal more food from the kitchens. Harry wanted to forget what he'd seen in the door, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares about his family. Over and over again he dreamed about his parents just standing there looking disapproved, all while his grandpa's high voice cackled with laughter. Hermione, who came back late the day before term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between shock and awe at the idea of Harry being out of bed, roaming the school 3 nights in a row. Harry didn't tell her about the ring, and frustration that he completely whiffed on finding out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had pretty much lost all hope of ever finding Flamel, even though Harry was still sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through books every second they could during their breaks, but their optimism was long gone. Harry put in less time than the other two, because Quidditch practice had started again and he was thankful for it. Wood was pushing the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his determination. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a tyrant, but Harry was on Wood's side. He didn't want to spend his time looking for Flamel if he could avoid it. Besides, if they won their next match, against Hufflepuff, it would guarantee themselves a spot ahead of Slytherin in the House Championship for the first time ever since Slytherin lost to Hufflepuff a few weeks prior. Then, during one extremely wet and cold practice session, Wood dropped a rather large bomb of news. He'd just gotten very angry with the Weasleys, who kept flying up and slapping him on the backside of his head. "Will all you stop messing around?" he yelled. "That's precisely the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. I just got word this morning that Madam Hooch had won the Wizards' lottery and flew off to the tropics. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to prevent Gryffindor from winning." George Weasley slapped himself on the head at these words. Snape's refereeing? He choked. What are his qualifications to referee a Quidditch match? He's going to prevent us from overtaking Slytherin, just you watch. The rest of the team started to complain, too. "Hey, it's not my fault it was Hooch's lucky day," said Wood. "We've just got to make sure we play this one by the book, so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us." The rest of the team continued to practice, but not Harry. He snuck off to the Gryffindor common room, where he found Neville and Hermione playing Daedric. Daedric was the only thing Neville ever won at. For whatever reason he had a commanding grasp of the rules. "Don't talk to me for a moment," said Hermione when Harry sat down next to her. "I need to concern." She caught sight of Harry's face. "What's with you? You look terrible. I need to talk to you, now." Harry grabbed her arm and pulled her to an empty corner. Speaking softly in Hermione's ear, Harry told her about Madame Hooch's sudden good fortune and Snape's sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. "Don't play," said Hermione at once. "Here, I'll even break your leg," as she took out her wand. "No, no," said Harry. "Nobody else knows how to masturbate. If I pull out, Gryffindor will lose for sure. Hey, by the way, why aren't you looking for Flamel? You're always drilling me how I need to." At that moment Ron toppled into the common room. How he had managed to climb through the portrait hole was anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognized at once to be the leg locker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell over laughing until Hermione performed the counter curse. Ron's legs sprang apart and he got to his feet, wobbling. "What happened to you?" Hermione asked him, still giggling. "Malfoy," said Ron irately. "I ran into him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice that on." All that laughing made Harry hungry. He felt in the pocket of his robes and pulled out a melty chocolate frog, the very last one from the sweet cart he had bought way at the beginning of the year. Harry glanced at the famous wizard card. "Drat. Dumbledore again," he said. "He was the first one I ever—" Then it hit him like a wrecking ball. He gawked at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. "I found him," he yelped. "I found him. Hail Julia. I found Flamel. I told you I'd read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Dumbledore is practically perfect in every way. Particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Adolf Hitler in 1945, for the discovery of his 12 uses for human blood, and his work on alchemy with his BFF, Nicholas Flamel." Hermione hadn't looked so excited since they'd gotten that massive essay assignment from Professor Flitwick. "Stay here," she said, and she sprinted out of the common room. Harry and Ron exchanged mystified looks, then talked about the weather for several hours before she came dashing back in with an enormous old book in her arms. "I never thought to look in here," she whispered excitedly. "I got this out of the library." "What took so long?" said Ron, but Hermione gave him that never-you-mind look while she began flipping frantically through the pages, then muttered to herself. At last she uncovered what she was looking for. "I knew it. I knew it. I knew it the whole time." "If you knew it the whole time, why didn't you look here?" said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. "Nicholas Flamel," she interrupted dramatically, "is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Bone." This didn't have quite the tantalizing effect she'd expected. "The what, now?" said Harry. "Oh, honestly, don't you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Look, read that, there." She shoved the book toward them, and Harry and Ron read. "The ancient study of alchemy is connected with making the Sorcerer's Bone, a legendary item with astonishing powers. The bone has the power to turn wood into gold, and when dropped in water with another secret ingredient it produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. The bone is also rumored to make the holder resistant to bug bites. Only one Sorcerer's Bone is known to exist, which currently belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and chocolate lover. It was produced one day during a freak laboratory accident Mr. Flamel was conducting in his alchemy studies. Sadly, the accident claimed his right arm, which then in turn became the Sorcerer's Bone. How Mr. Flamel discovered his severed arm's magical secrets is anyone's guess. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Kent with his wife, Christy, 22. "What I tell ya?" said Hermione, when Harry and Ron had finished. "The dog thing must be guarding Flamel's bone. I bet he begged Dumbledore to keep it safe for him, because they're BFFs, and he got a hot tip that someone was after it. That's why he wanted the bone moved out of Gringotts." "A bone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying," said Harry. "Ha, no wonder Snape's after it. I wanted to. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that report of the freshest developments in wizardry," said Ron. "He's not exactly fresh off the presses if he's 665, is he?" As the next Quidditch match drew nearer, the idea of surpassing Slytherin in the House Championship was wonderful. None of the houses had done it for several years, but would they be permitted to, with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. In the hallways, in the courtyard, in the bathroom. He was convinced Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into a weekly round of torture. Snape was so nasty to Harry. Could Snape possibly know he was the one who had set fire to his office? Harry didn't see how he could, yet he sometimes had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew when they wished him good luck outside the locker rooms the next afternoon that Ron and Hermione were not expecting to ever see him alive again. This wasn't exactly what you'd call reassuring. Harry completely ignored Wood's pep talk as he pulled on his Quidditch robes and picked up his nincompoop 2002. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, or why they had both brought their wands to the match. Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They'd gotten the idea from Malfoy using it on Ron, and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting to injure Harry. Though, Harry would later question what good that would have done if Snape was on a broom. "Now, don't forget, it's lock leggings," Hermione muttered as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve for lighting fast access. "I know," Ron snapped. "Don't insult me, woman." Back in the locker room, Wood had taken Harry aside. "Don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if we lose, you're off the team." Harry gulped. "The whole school's out there," said Fred Weasley, peering out of the door. "Blimey, even Dumbledore's come to spectate." Harry's heart did a cartwheel. "Dumbledore, did you say?" he said, dashing to the door to make sure it was for real. Fred was right. There was no mistaking that silver beard. Harry loled with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way in a million years Snape would dare to try to hurt him with Dumbledore looking on. Perhaps that was why Snape looked so livid as the teams marched onto the field. He blew his whistle and the game began. Harry flicked his hand at a bug buzzing around his ear before he took off. But when his hand came back, he realized it wasn't a bug at all. It was the golden snitch. Harry had inadvertently grabbed it when he swatted. He raised his arm in triumph, the snitch clasped firmly in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron. The game's over. Harry's won. We've won. Gryffindor is in the lead, shrieked Hermione, jumping up and down on her seat and hugging Parvati Patil in the row in front. Harry jumped off his broom. He didn't even make it a foot off the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It had barely lasted 2 seconds. As Gryffindors came spilling onto the field, he saw Snape nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped. Then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. "Well done," said Dumbledore quietly, who then faded back into the crowd. Snape spat bitterly on the ground and gave Harry a cold stare down. Harry left the locker room alone some time later after taking a nap in the corner to take his nincompoop 2002 back to the broom shed. Apparently the excitement of the win got him so worked up that it made him sleepy. And he found an opportune moment to sneak away from his team while they were changing. He located a quiet nook in the shadows and passed out for a few hours, but now on his way across the lawn, reflecting back on what had transpired earlier, he couldn't ever remember feeling happier, well, except for the time he was told the heaps of gold in the Gringotts vault belonged to him. His Quidditch win is a solid second to that. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one could say he was just a famous name anymore. From now on he'll be known as the boy who accidentally caught the snitch. He tasted sweet victory yet again, and it only made him hungry for more. He trampled over some daffodils on his way to the shed, reliving the game in his head, which was a total drunken blur, Gryffindors running to lift him onto their shoulders like the Quidditch god he is. Harry approached the shed. He leaned against the wooden door for a breather. It was quite the hike from the Quidditch field. He looked up at Hogwarts, with its windows glowing red in the setting sun. Gryffindor is in the lead. He's the top dog now. He's conquered this school. He'd shown Snape who's boss. And speaking of Snape, a hooded figure came prancing down the front steps of the castle. Clearly not wanting to be seen, it ran faster than you would have thought possible toward the Forbidden Forest. Harry's conquest faded from his mind as he surveyed the situation. He knew at once that there could only be one possibility for who this was: Snape. No one else would be sneaking into the forest while everyone else was at dinner. What was going on? Harry needed to investigate. He felt it was his duty. He jumped back on his trusty nincompoop 2002 and took off. Gliding without a sound over the castle, he saw Snape running into the forest. Harry followed his prey. The trees were so thick he lost Snape almost instantly. He flew in circles, panicking about what to do, brushing the top branches of trees until he heard voices. Relieved, he glided toward them and landed in a towering beech tree. Below, in a shadowy pond of water, stood Snape, but he wasn't unaccompanied. Quirrell was there, too. At least, Harry thought it was Quirrell because whoever it was stuttering worse than ever. Harry stretched out his neck to catch what they were saying. "Dotty don't know why you wanted TT to meet here of all places, Severus. TH the danger's quite real, you not know." "Oh, I thought we'd spice things up a bit," said Snape, his voice icy. "Besides, there's no point in living if you can't feel alive. Out here there are plenty of prying beasts, yes, but no prying students. They aren't supposed to know about the sorcerer's bone, after all." Harry leaned forward with great interest. Quirrell was mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. "Have you found out how to get past that abomination of Hagrid's yet?" But Severus, You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell," said Snape, poking him several times in the chest. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I'm talking about." A pig goinked loudly, and Harry nearly fell out of the tree. He steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, "Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting." But I don't. "Have it your way," Snape cut in. "We'll have another little heart-to-heart session soon, when you've had time to think things over and decide where your loyalties lie." He threw his cloak over his head and stomped away, splashing the shallow water all over the place as he went. It was very dark now, but Harry could see Quirrell, standing quite still in the pool of water as though he was petrified. "Harry, where have you been?" Hermione squeaked. "You won. You won. You won," shouted Ron, smacking Harry on the butt. "Talk about showing Slytherin. Everyone's waiting for you in the common room, we're having a get-together. Fred and George stole all kinds of cakes and stuff from the kitchens." "Never mind that now, not now, not now," said Harry breathlessly, meeting up with them in a corridor. "Boy oh boy, let's find an empty room, just you wait till you hear this." He made sure Peeves left after being sprayed with slimy green goo and shut the door to the nearest room they found behind him, then he told what he'd witnessed. "So we were dead on, it is the sorcerer's bone, and Snape's trying to blackmail Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fuzzy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone apart from Fuzzy, loads of enchantments, probably. Fuzzy is only stage 1 and Quirrell would have done some anti-dark side of the force spell that Snape needs to break through." "So you mean the bone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape?" said Hermione in alarm. "It'll be gone by tomorrow," said Ron. Guys, Hermione said. "We should go to Dumbledore about this. He'll take corrective action. We should have gone to him ages ago when we first suspected something's up." Harry and Ron both just stared at her. "No," Harry finally stated. "We uncovered this conspiracy. I'm not going to Dumbledore until we've seen this thing through to the end. I'm taking Snape on myself. Who's with me?" Harry put his hand in the air. Ron's hand soon joined his. Hermione eventually came around and put hers up too, so that they formed a pyramid. "Yeah," Harry smirked.